So we just wrapped up our conference for the future of Houston's children, and I am joined here by one of our board members at Children at Risk, Laurence Payne. So he does many things for us, and we're pleased to have him with us today. So, after wrapping up this conference, I know there's a lot of discussion, there's, a lot of possibility in the air for what the next steps are. And so with that, I want to make sure that we're continuing to have these conversations so that we're all talking about what to do next. And so my question to you is, the first question is, when it comes to, addressing and thinking about the future of our children, what, in your opinion, are the top 3 priorities that we should be focused on to ensure the success of our children for the future?
I think it's a very good question. I think the first thing we have to face is the reality of whom we're trying to educate. And that's where I use that phrase, the new unempowered majority. The new unempowered majority. I think there's something even psychological about when we start referring to these children as minority children, or undocumented children, or illegal children. I think you got to realize they're human beings, and they are the majority. They will be the majority of the future of the city and the state. And we have to educate them. We have no choice but to educate them. And so how we think about the status of the new unempowered majority, all the words we heard, our seed that we want to plant to go forward, our future workforce, all the things that we've heard today, what does that really mean to empower another human being, to give them all they need to develop to their fullest God-given potential? It is the question of human beings, not individuals, not persons, not students. When you elevate the human being to the level of being a human being, then you are able to look at what do they need to succeed and be successful. We therefore become servants, servant leadership, and servers to the human being to help him or her develop to their fullest God-given potential. I think it's time to change the way we look at this. The second issue, I think, is the issue of looking at what Steve Kleinberg, our good friend at Rice University, talked to Bob Stein picked up on a little bit. You're asking an aging European-American Caucasian white population to ask themselves for young Latino and African-American children. We have to figure out a better way to make that connection, because that disconnect that exists now between why they should be involved in this education movement, not only for the issue of bonds, elections, and tax increases, but why they as adults, as non-parents, as retirees, should be back engaged in schools as volunteers, as helpers, and doing that. I think we've seen in this legislative session this great divide between the I and me and the we and us people. I think that divide is real. I think it's a question of even how people begin to see democracy. What does it mean to be a citizen in a democracy, and how we look at helping each other. So I think we have all those. But the third one I think is the most critical one. The third one is I think we have to raise this discussion, elevate this discussion to a movement that needs to take place of passionate people. Now, how do you get a movement? You get a movement from people who you take the debate or discussion away from enlightened self-interest, or as Bob said, growing self-interest, whatever the word, enhanced self-interest. You take it away from the common good, because appealing to the common good obviously hasn't worked. You take it to the next level. The issue of public urban education and the need to educate all children is perhaps the premier human rights issue of our decade. It's a human rights issue. So if you deal with the students as human beings, if you elevate it to a human rights discussion, then what are we talking about? We're talking about a value discussion, a moral, ethical values. What do we value as citizens in a democracy for all our people, for all our children? Now you've elevated the discussion to a higher level. I think it's time we take the discussion to the higher level. I think it's time we develop a movement of compassionate people who understand that it is a discussion about human rights, about human beings, and then you take it to a way that you engage in a larger dialogue, and you begin the dialogue around the things we already agree on. Let's start from the consensus of the things we already agree on, not what we disagree on. So it's a whole new way of looking at things. And then I think you're able to pull people together into the dialogue and have them accept the other person's perspective, opinion, viewpoint that may be different from their own. Because right now, what passes for acceptance, what passes for dialogue is really polite conversations. We just tolerate the other person's opinion, perspective, and viewpoint. I'll end with this. I always say in Texas, I tolerate the roaches, the heat, the mosquitoes. I don't want to put a human being on the same level of something I just tolerate. Never going to love, never going to accept, never going to embrace, just tolerate. We can't, it's not about tolerance, it's not about tolerance, it's about acceptance. And I think we're going to have to realize the interdependency, interconnectedness of us in Texas. We're all tied together. These Latino children, African American children, the future of this state. We cannot escape that future. We cannot divorce ourselves from that future, and we have to figure out how to help them.
So knowing how many individuals should be involved in this and knowing how much work can be done and should be done, with so much to address, what do you think is the most pressing issue from the three that you just discussed?
The number one is the movement.
The movement?
We have to get people passionate, angry, mad, and get them engaged. And we have to give them the tools to empower them so they'll be advocates with the tools they need to be proper advocates. And to do it consistently, constantly, always. Angela said it in her keynote about beating the drum. We got to get drum. We used to call it in the 60s with the movement with Dr. King, drum majors for justice. Public education is a social justice issue. It is a human rights issue. It is a premier civil rights issue. How do you get drum majors for justice? And Angela said you beat the drum with consistency, with continuity, with persistence. All those things you don't give up. You get your advocates, you train them, you get them organized, and you get them to be just constant, persistent people. It's like that little drip of water that ends up dropping on that rock. That if it drops on that rock long enough, it wears that rock down to a pedal. And so we have to get people that the road movie network, that guy's afraid, what is it, I'm mad as hell, we're not going to take it anymore. Mm-hmm. That's what we need.
Yep.
I mean, people say, enough's enough. It's not a question of who's right or who's wrong, your side, that side, enough. It's the children that matters, not the adults, not what your wishes and desires are, not what you think is important. It's about the children. And we got to take it away from adults who are narrow-minded, who are self-serving, who are self-interest driven only, and only for the contracts, for whatever it may be, for the vendors. Take it out of the hands of the lobbyists and put it back where it belongs in the hands of the people.
So knowing how important this movement is and what it can do to fuel the fire and fuel passion and really motivate people to take action, what's one policy that you would like to see in place so that this movement can get off the ground? I mean, it's very grassroots right now.
I think once we get the movement kind of organized, I think what we focus on in this year between the next session is that we need to come up with what is the threshold level. The threshold level of which we're all going to make sure that every student, every human being in Texas, the minimal threshold that we provide them in public education, in healthcare, in health services, in mental health services. We need to put the human being back into the equation. We cannot keep being proud of being the lowest the lowest state in every category of spending for human beings. We can't be proud of that. Some people wear that like a red badge of courage because our taxes are low, because we don't do this, we don't do that. That's nothing to be proud of. We ought to be taking it as I said earlier, a moral, ethical issue that has a value-laden question. What is the least level of threshold for any issue you can name that we're going to make sure we afford to every human being in the state of Texas, children and adults? Now that kind of thing can get people going. Because you set a ceiling and a bar, and you're realizing that you have to set it somewhat low maybe to begin with, but the idea is that you build on it at every session. You increase it at every session. Just like they're talking about now with the rainy day fund, they're talking about building in resources that increase the money in the rainy day fund every session. Same thing with that threshold. You set a minimal threshold, then nothing below, nobody's going to fall below that in Texas. All right? It's going to be enough to sustain human beings. But yet the goal is not to just set it, it's to increase it at every session. Now you have something. And now we don't have to worry about people falling between the cracks. All the issues we heard in here, from obesity to poverty to hunger to food and all those, we don't have to worry about that. We say as a state, we are going to care for every human being at least at this level to keep them above the line. We don't do that now. We're proud to be as low as Mississippi or low as Louisiana or low as whoever. That's nothing to be proud about.
It starts with policy.
It is. It's how we shape public policy with the human being. I cannot emphasize that enough. There's a wonderful thing in both philosophy and theology and epistemology and psychology, and that talks about the essence of the human being. When you care about the essence of human beingness, you cannot make certain decisions. You can only make certain decisions that is for the good and the benefit of the human being. And we do everything so contrary to that now. We don't take human beings into consideration, the impact of our legislation, or the impact, particularly on the least, the last, the loss of our society. Everything we do should be geared toward what is the impact on the least, the last, the lost of our society. We don't take that into consideration. It's me. It's all about me. I and me. And I think the I and meism, the I and me people are killing not only the present, but we're killing the future of the state of Texas. We're endangering our future as a state and as a city and to be able to be competitive internationally and nationally, let alone within our own country. I think it's such a short-sighted. I think it's just so short-sighted. The vision is, there is no vision. It's not even a vision. You can't even call it a vision. It's so short-sighted from here to that wall. But all that matters is now. My election. Bob Stein said it. My election, my re-election, my people, my group, the people I represent, my constituents. There is no my. There is no my. Nowhere have I read in the Constitution of America, I the people. Nowhere have I read I and me. We have fought against we the people, both in Texas and the United States, to understand that concept until it is so clear what happened in this legislative session. There are 5 tenets of what it means to be a citizen living in a democracy. We love to have a conversation about 2 of those 5, which are my individual rights and privileges that go with being a citizen. We love that one. Why? That's a discussion about me. Right? Looking at me funny, it's all about me. We love that. We'll have that I and me conversation discussion all day. What about the other 3 of the 5 tenets of what it means to be a citizen living in a democracy, which are what? What are our common duties, obligations, and responsibilities to whom? Define the whom. In Texas, define the whom is the other. The other. Define the other. Someone different than me, someone that does not look like me. There's the rub. As long as the other could be defined as someone that looks like me, we were okay. We still didn't fund things the way we should have, but we fund them better than we do now. And I think we cannot escape from the fear factor of the other, the growing Latino population. There's a fear. The numbers are just so astronomical that people can't even take them in. They can't even deal with them. Secondly, because they've done nothing to develop relationships across those lines. Not only are the numbers out of whack, there are no relationships. So I fear what I don't know. I've not taken the time to know them, and now the numbers are so out of scale, out of proportion that we can't deal with it. So I think we got the fear factor. I think we got the numbers changed. I think the other thing we have is that the other, how we define the other and how we understand the other is going to be, I think, our biggest challenge going forward. But it is, and using Steve Kleinberg's word, PLE, people like me. When the numbers have shifted and people are not like me, don't look like me, don't talk like me, don't even speak the same language as me, what am I to do? And it's not even necessarily racial. It is a failure to make the connection, the interdependency, interconnectedness of why we're all in this together. There is no independence. And that's the thing I always love, the Republic of Texas. And you talk about that a lot. They talk about state rights and all that. They fail to understand there is no independence without interdependency. You cannot be a part of a state in we the people and not focus on interdependency. You cannot be independent without independency. And we miss all those points because we choose to miss in this state. With minority, when actually, quote unquote, the old minority is now the new independent majority, is your entire future. Is your entire future. So how can you be negative and use negative terms for something that in fact is your entire future? It doesn't work anymore. So it's a whole new education, it's a whole new reframing. I think reframing is a big part of it. How you lessen people's fears by reframing things with honesty and truth, not with myth and rumor and opinion, but the real truth and the real facts. I think that's our challenge at Children at Risk, is to make sure we're the broker of truth and fact, and that we dispel people's myths and opinions and not let them permeate the way people feel about other people. We probably went on too long, but it's been a good discussion.
It has been. Mr. Laurence Payne, talking about the future of Houston's children and really addressing the fact that this is a human rights campaign and that we need to form a movement so that we can really get some change done. So thank you so much for your time. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.